Hi. So, like I was saying earlier, explaining in Chinese, today we'll be discussing English idioms, sayings, and slang. Hopefully, I think all of you at some point probably wondered how to say certain more casual speech in everyday language, things that you may not learn in textbooks or class time. So I have compiled a couple of sayings, maybe around 10 to 15 of them, and I'm hoping to give you the similar equivalent in Chinese and then explain them in English. And then at the end, I will ask you 3 questions, and hopefully all of you can give me responses to the best of your ability. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. I'm more than happy to discuss with you and elaborate further. So our first example is 耳边风. And in English, I think the closest saying that's quite similar is in one ear and out the other. So, for example, you would say, my mother was talking to me, but I didn't really hear her because all the information she gave me went in one ear and out the other, which in Chinese would be like, 我当他说的话是耳边风. The second one might be a bit of a funnier example is 脱裤子放屁. And in English, that means being redundant. So you're saying things that are unnecessary or you're doing things in a way that is not required of you. So I think the most casual way to say this in English, and it definitely is quite casual because you would never say this in class or to a teacher or maybe an adult, it would be, don't be extra. So that would be something maybe people say on the internet a lot on Facebook or to their friends, stop being extra. My next example is 吃饱撑着. In Chinese, this is sort of used as an adjective to describe someone who's being very bored and they're not doing anything productive. And in English, we don't really have a saying that can be used this way to describe someone, but the closest way maybe that you would express this to somebody is to tell someone, get a hobby or get a life. And the second one, get a life, is a lot harsher than the first one. So maybe you would only say this to a close friend, not someone who you don't know really well, because that could be taken as an insult. Similar to this saying, 吃饱撑着, the next one is 闲着没事做. And there isn't really a slang saying that is equivalent to this in English, but the best way to describe this would be hanging around with nothing to do. So when you say hanging around, it's kind of like saying someone is just doing nothing, relaxing, walking around. So I think though it's not necessarily slang, it is more casual. Be a potato is more internet speech. So these days on Facebook or Instagram, people in North America especially tend to call each other potatoes when they're not really doing anything, such as, for example, these days under quarantine, me and my friends will say to each other, oh my God, today I have only been a potato and I've been a potato for all these months and it feels terrible. The next one is 钻牛角尖. And in English, I have a couple of ways to say this, though there's only one that is a slang equivalent. So I'm just going to go over the more formal ways of saying it. You can call it fixating on or obsessing over something. The next one is refusing to let go of something. Or the last one, and this one really is slang, I wouldn't call this vulgar exactly, but it is definitely not something I would say to a teacher or anybody who you respect. It's called being anal. This one I hear from my parents a lot, or maybe a lot of Chinese people use it, at least in my experience, and it's 物以类聚. It's really good because actually in English we have a saying that is identical to this one, though we don't say it in the same way. So we will say, birds of a feather flock together. So it's kind of like saying, 鸟如果有一样颜色的羽毛会在一起, if that makes any sense. So you don't have to say the long version. You can also just say birds of a feather for short. In the theme of birds, this is the first saying I have that actually is basically identical from Chinese to English. It's 一石二鸟. And in English, you say 2 birds, 1 stone. So it's the exact same saying, but you flip it backwards. So the next one is 扮猪吃老虎. And though I wouldn't say this type of saying is as common in English, the way I might explain it to a friend who only speaks English is playing innocent when you're the worst of all. So it's like playing a role. But I think the closest saying that we have to this is a wolf in sheep's skin. So just imagine a wolf wearing a sheep's skin. 守株待兔 can be said in a couple of ways in English. The first two, they're going to be sayings. So, for example, you can say, waiting for things to fall into your lap. The next one is more common than the first one. It's waiting for things to be served to you on a platter. So that last one I would hear from my teachers in elementary school a lot. So when kids were misbehaving or they were being lazy, the teacher would always be like, why are you sitting there waiting for me to serve things to you on a platter? So it's kind of like, imagine you're a princess and you need everything to be placed nicely in front of you or you won't eat. The more formal explanation of this, the way I would explain 守株待兔 to an English speaker would be being passive and not taking initiative. So this is obviously more of a formal explanation. 自找麻烦 in English is quite similar to the Chinese. It's basically directly translated. You would just say, looking for trouble for yourself. Except I think in English it is more casual and definitely more common to just say, you are looking for trouble. You don't really have to say for yourself at the end. Most people don't. 井底之蛙. This is a saying in Chinese which I often wish we had a better way of saying in English, because 井底之蛙 is a much more poetic, in my opinion, way of saying things to describe people who are narrow-minded. So in English, you would just say, you are being narrow-minded, or you are being a bigot. Bigot is a little bit of a fancier word, so actually a lot of people I know, or a lot of people my age, may not know what it is if they don't read a lot. So it is definitely not so much slang, and it is much more formal. I think the closest way of saying this, which is sort of a saying, is you have yet to broaden your horizons. A bigot in English, it's a noun. It means somebody who doesn't like to accept new opinions, only thinks their own opinion is right, and will aggressively reject other people's thoughts as long as it doesn't line up with what they have to say. This next one I really like, and in Chinese it's 疑神疑鬼. In English, to explain this more formally, it's just being suspicious. But the next two sayings I really like because a lot of young people these days will use it, maybe people in their 20s or people in high school, because it originates from the internet. You would say, you are acting sus. And sus is short for suspect. And then the second way of saying it is less of internet speech, though it also is. This is something more used in regular conversation with friends. You would say, you are being sketchy. With sus, you don't necessarily even have to use being sus. I think a more common way to say it is someone might be telling you something and it sounds a little bit suspicious, then you'll just be like, oh, sus. And you can just say one word and people kind of know what you're talking about. They're just saying like, oh, that sounds like it's a bit weird and maybe you should pay attention to that. It's kind of a very, very casual way of talking. 一帆风顺. There isn't really an exact English equivalent to this either, but there are two options. Not many people use this first one, so actually a lot of English speakers might not know what this first one is, especially if they're younger, but it's Godspeed. And Godspeed means I hope everything goes smoothly for you. And this can be used literally or figuratively. I personally use this a lot, but I have also used this with friends and had people ask me, what are you talking about? So maybe not something you want to use commonly. Another way of saying this, though, people will definitely know, it's smooth sailing. So you can say, I hope everything is smooth sailing for you. Either way, you are using the idea of a ship and a sail, just the same way as in Chinese. Okay, so I think that's probably enough sayings for today. I do have a couple of questions now for you. I hope all of you can take 3 of any of the sayings that I've mentioned today and you can make a sentence out of it. And of course, this might be a little difficult because you've never heard them used in context, but I'm here, so definitely if you have any questions, either ask now, or if you're not as comfortable asking in the group, you can always private message me. But yes, if you can, make 3 examples out of the sayings that I've given you.